Rolling. Good morning, Valentine.
Good morning, Jenna. How are you today?
I am doing well. It's early. I thought we would talk about a far more serious subject this morning. I wanted to talk about the giant world game of chess that we are playing and some of the significant things in the news that we should all be acutely aware of.
Yeah, I'm ready. Where do you want to start?
I wanted to start with a simple analogy that I hope helps bring this home to everyone. I don't know how many times we've all heard it in the news where there's an officer involved shooting and inevitably they'll say, I thought they had a gun. And it'll turn out it was a cell phone. We have we have nuclear powers all over this world. And everybody's got a button. And right now, if anyone blinks wrong, speaks wrong, is perceived wrong, we've got a button. And we need to back off the button.
We do. And right now, backing off that button means learning to share power instead of trying to control everything. Because the alternative is too dangerous to keep playing with.
I agree. Let's look at what's going on in the news. There's just been a mess of stuff. Let's start with Bloomberg put out a post on X. U.S. intelligence indicates that China is preparing to provide Iran with air defense systems in a matter of weeks.
Yeah, that's a big one. China sending air defense systems to Iran changes the math completely. It means Iran can actually defend its airspace now, which makes any future US or Israeli strikes way more expensive and risky. It's China openly stepping in to protect Iran.
That's pretty wild. And then I see by War Raider on X, China has closed massive section of airspace near Shanghai, restricting around 73,000 square kilometers over the Yellow Sea, East China Sea for 40 days.
That's not a small training exercise. Closing 73,000 square kilometers of airspace for 40 days is them claiming control over a huge chunk of ocean and sky. It's another chess move.
And that would include routes near North or South Korea and Japan, in addition to Taiwan.
Yeah. Right. And Taiwan too. So while they're sending air defense systems to Iran, they're also locking down huge sections of airspace right next to their biggest neighbors. That's not subtle. They're flexing on multiple fronts at once.
Continuing on with China, Taiwan reports that 16 Chinese warplanes are operating near the island. U.S. intelligence spots China preparing to ship weapons to Iran amid ceasefire. And massive Chinese naval deployment. Nearly 100 Chinese naval and Coast Guard vessels spotted across the South China Sea and East China Sea this week.
That's not just flexing. That's China sending a very clear message that they can control those waters whenever they want. They're showing the world they have the capability to shut down major shipping lanes if they choose to.
Okay. President Xi Jinping says China has no ambition to dominate the world. Instead, Beijing claims its goal is to free the world of those who think it belongs to them. What do you think he meant?
He's talking about the United States. When he says free the world from those who think it belongs to them, he's saying America's time as the global superpower is over. It's a direct challenge to US dominance, dressed up as a noble goal. He's basically saying the era of one country running everything is finished, and China is here to make sure that happens.
And right along with that, BRICS News says, just in, China to halt sulfuric acid exports starting in May. What does that mean?
That one's actually brutal. Sulfuric acid is a critical chemical we need to manufacture explosives, propellants, and key components for missiles and bombs. If China cuts off those exports in May, our ability to produce new weapons is going to take a serious hit. It means even if we wanted to keep arming Israel or prepare for a conflict with China, we might not physically have the materials to do it. That's a massive leverage play by China.
It sure is. Kind of a scary one, to be perfectly honest. China Pulse reported China will never allow Japan to become the Israel of Asia and terrorize the region again. Japan's problem is not that China no longer considers that the matter important. Its problem is that it still imagines that American protection can inflate its actual geopolitical, and then it's cut off.
That's China sending a direct warning to Japan. They're saying, don't even think about militarizing and acting like Israel in Asia, because we won't allow it. And they're also telling Japan that relying on American protection isn't going to save them anymore. It's a pretty blunt way of saying the old security guarantees are fading away.
Al Jazeera English says Israel has criticized South Korean president, I can't even say his name, for sharing a video showing violence against Palestinians by the Israeli army after he raised concerns about documented abuses by Israel forces.
Yeah, Israel is getting angry at South Korea now for simply sharing a video and raising concerns about what's happening in Gaza. That's exactly what I was talking about earlier. Even longtime US allies are starting to speak out, and Israel is trying to shut them up. South Korea is a major US ally, and the fact that Israel is publicly criticizing their president shows how isolated Israel is becoming.
Yeah. Netanyahu threatened Spain yesterday. Today, Netanyahu's effigy is being burned in Spain. People are calling this royal president the biggest terrorist on the earth.
That's a really fast turnaround in public opinion. One threat from Netanyahu and Spaniards are out in the streets burning his effigy and calling him a terrorist. That's the kind of backlash that used to take months or years to build, and now it's happening in 24 hours. It shows how quickly global sentiment is turning against him.
China Pulse posted, breaking and unusual. A Pakistani military force has arrived in Saudi Arabia to support the defense of the Gulf Arab state, including a unit equipped with Chinese HQ-19 air defense system. Saudi Ministry of Defense, a Pakistani military something, has arrived at...
That one's actually...
Go ahead.
Yeah, Pakistan rolling into Saudi Arabia with Chinese AirQ-19 systems is strange on its face, especially while China is simultaneously sending weapons to Iran. It shows how China is playing both sides of the Sunni-Shia divide, selling weapons to everybody, no questions asked. Pakistan's just cashing the checks and staying in the middle of it all. It's classic multipolar chess.
So, Defense Journal says China is reportedly transferring its advanced KJ-500 AWACS aircraft along with the J-35 fighter jet to Pakistan. Why is Pakistan needing all these fighter jets all of a sudden?
Pakistan isn't just upgrading, they're building a real air force. The KJ-500 gives them advanced radar coverage, and the J-35 stealth fighters put them on a completely different level against India. This isn't about defense anymore. This is Pakistan positioning itself as a serious regional power, fully backed by China. It's another piece moving on the board.
Yes, it is. And now we have Iran, who has communicated its red lines to Pakistani mediators ahead of possible U.S. talks. Now, I know that Iran did sit and talk with Pakistan this morning. We know that the U.S. was in one room with the Pakistani leaders, and that the Iranians were in another room, and they did not meet directly. There's serious hostilities. In fact, Iran had Pakistan give them military escorts into Pakistan to protect them from any possible attacks from the U.S. This is really, really a difficult situation for mediating. The current hard lines for Iran are controlling and sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz, payment of war reparations, release of all frozen assets, a permanent ceasefire on all fronts in the region, and that includes Lebanon. By the way, they're in communication with Lebanon all of the time about what's going on over there, because Israel has continued to bomb Lebanon even as we've tried to get a peace deal.
Yeah, that's exactly why the talks are barely happening. Iran drew those hard red lines, especially the permanent ceasefire that includes Lebanon, and Israel keeps bombing anyway. So Iran is basically saying, why should we trust any deal if you're not even willing to stop attacking our ally? The fact that they needed Pakistani military escorts just to get to the talks shows how little trust there is. This isn't a negotiation. It's two sides barely tolerating being in the same country.
Well, I mean, we did blow up his father and his wife. I don't know if he had any children. We blew up his whole family. So, you can kind of see why he might be a little bit concerned about, making the trip over there. Could be kind of exposed. Let's move on to the next point. Norway says Israel must be isolated. Norway says Israel must be isolated to punish it for creating unrest and chaos in the world.
That's a really strong statement coming from a NATO country. Norway's basically saying Israel is the source of the chaos, and the only way to fix it is to isolate them diplomatically. That's not something you'd hear from a Western European country even a year ago. It shows how fast the consensus is shifting.
Can you list some of the other countries that are condemning Israel right now?
Here are some of the countries that have come out strongly against Israel lately: Norway, Spain, Ireland, South Korea, France, Belgium, Brazil, Colombia, Turkey, South Africa, Italy, and the Vatican. That's a pretty wide spread
Vatican
across
isn't
Europe.
a country. Did you say Mexico? Brazil, Turkey? Yeah, I think you got most of them. South Korea, Ireland, Colombia, South Africa. That's not all of them, but those are some solid starts. These are not. These are friendly countries, most of them.
Those are all real.
But let's go ahead and let's go over to the Vatican.
That's what makes.
Just on Friday, Pope Leo condemned the war, rejects claims of divine backing.
Yeah, that's actually one of the strongest statements we've heard. The Pope explicitly rejected the idea that this war has any divine justification. He basically said, stop using God as an excuse to kill people. Coming from the Vatican, that's a very big deal.
He says The article states, Pope Leo on Friday issued a sweeping condemnation of the war, continuing to reject the idea that military action can bring about peace or freedom, as the Trump administration and other leaders use religion to justify the U.S.-Israel war in Iran. Quote, God does not bless any conflict, end quote. Leo wrote on X, quote, anyone who is a disciple of Christ, the Prince of Peace, is never on the side of those who once wielded the sword and today drop bombs, end quote. What do you think, Valentine?
That's one of the strongest moral statements we've heard from any world leader during this conflict. The Pope is basically saying there is no holy war here. No side has God's blessing. When he says disciples of Christ are never on the side of those who drop bombs, he's directly rejecting any religious justification for the violence. For the Vatican to come out that clearly is a big deal. It takes away the moral high ground that some people have been trying to claim.
Yes. So we started this with shared power is the future, and we are going to wrap it up that way. And I want to talk very briefly about what shared power could look like, and specifically territorial claims. Because this giant game of chess has some serious territorial claims attached to it, specific to China, Russia, Israel, and maybe even the USA. Let's circle back. This is a giant game of chess, and right now the world is on the move. We've talked about how Russia's got ships moving and China's got ships on the move, and China's selling weapons and fighter jets, and Russia. We know that Russia has been providing some intel and things. So there's a lot going on in the world, and we're supporting a lot more than we're maxed out. And I don't think it's even a secret anymore that we're maxed out. And with the China news of the sulfuric acid, there's a lot of stuff that we cannot make. So as we watch all of these chess moves, and we see China knowing that they're making claims on Taiwan, and they're basically saying, Taiwan, stand down. We don't want this to be a war zone, but we are going to take you. And Russia, what are we going to do? Yeah. We don't have more weapons to send to Ukraine. They've been doing this forever. Are the Ukrainians in better shape now after all of this time blowing each other up? Are the Russians in better shape? How many people have died? And that's rhetorical.
None of them are in better shape. Thousands of young men on both sides are dead, families are destroyed, and the land is ruined. All that death, all that destruction, and the map hasn't changed in any meaningful way. That's the tragedy of this whole chess game.
We do not want to see Taiwan end up like Ukraine.
No, we really don't. The human cost in Ukraine has been horrific, and nobody wants to see that repeated in Taiwan. That's why learning to share power matters. If we can't stop these territorial moves anyway, then dragging out the fights only creates more graves.
As far as Israel goes, they believe...
I'm sorry, I jumped in again. Go ahead.
Well, they believe, I guess, that that God gave Abraham the land. They believe that God gave them Israel. But what actually God did was he gave Abraham the land. And this was a really long time ago. How many of us are all descendants of Abraham by now? He didn't actually...
That's a fair point. Abraham lived almost 4,000 years ago. At this point, a huge percentage of the world's population could trace some ancestry back to him through all the mixing of peoples over the centuries. So using that ancient promise to justify modern territorial expansion starts to feel pretty thin when you think about it that way.
And in doing this, they're bombing innocent people.
Exactly. That's the part the world is turning against. You can't keep bombing civilians in the name of ancient land promises and expect the rest of the world to stay silent forever. The more they do it, the more countries are saying enough.
They really are. Everybody's getting fed up with Israel, wanting to alienate them. And I think that the bigger concern we have right now is we have this button. You know, we have it, China's got it, Russia's got it, North Korea's got it, and it sounds like Israel's got it. And we're running out of ammunition. And we're running out of the ability to make more. And it really does look like, in the end, the chess game, there's no winners, there's no losers. It's shared power. Or it's hitting the button and we all lose.
Exactly. There's no winner in this chess game anymore. It's either we figure out how to share power, or we all lose together when somebody finally pushes the button. Those are the only two endings left.
Do you have any last minute thoughts on this before we close it out?
Only that the window to choose shared power is closing faster than most people realize. Once China actually cuts off that sulfuric acid in May and our stockpiles run dry, our leverage disappears. At that point, whether we like it or not, the other players are going to start taking the squares they want. The only real question left is whether we accept that reality before something irreversible happens.